shelter was shining like a national guitar. I am following the river down the highway through the cradle of the Civil War. I'm going to Graceland, Graceland, to Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to Graceland. Poor boys and pilgrims with families, and we are going to Graceland. And my traveling companion is 9 years old. He's the child of my first marriage. But I've reason to believe we both will be received in Graceland. She comes back to tell me she's gone, as if I didn't know that, as if I didn't know my own bed, as if I'd never noticed the way she brushed her hair from her forehead. And she said, losing love is like a window in your heart. Everybody sees you're blown apart. Everybody sees the wind blow.
Coisa mais linda, mais cheia de graça, ela, menina que vem e que passa, num doce balanço, caminho do mar. Moça do corpo dourado do sol de Ipanema, o seu balançado é mais que um poema, é a coisa mais linda que eu já vi passar. Porque estou tão sozinho. Porque tudo é tão triste. Beleza que existe. A beleza que não é só minha, que também passa sozinha. Se ela soubesse que quando ela passa, o mundo sorrindo se enche de graça e fica mais lindo por causa do amor.
Tall and tan and young and lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking, and when she passes, each one she passes goes When she walks, she's like a samba that swings so cool and sways so gently, that when she passes, each one she passes goes
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't
Go, Jimmy,
back
go.
down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. Gonna stand my ground, won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I got just one life in a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. No, I won't back down.
Making her cry.
I've been to Hollywood, I've been to Redwood, I crossed the ocean for a heart of gold. I've been in my mind.
My stroke. Like it's been very good.
I'll say. Here, here.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Talk about constant.
Keep me searching for a heart of gold. You keep me searching and I'm growing old. Keep me searching for a heart of gold. I've been a miner for a heart of gold. I see the sword of Damocles is right above your head. They're trying a new treatment to get you out of bed. But radiation kills both bad and good, it cannot differentiate. So to cure you, they must kill you. The sword of Damocles hangs above your head. Now I've seen lots of people die from car crashes or drugs. Last night on 33rd Street I saw a kid get hit by a bus. But this drawn out torture over which part of you lives is very hard to take. To cure you they must kill you, the sword of Damocles above your head.
Nobody feels any pain tonight as I stand inside the rain. Everybody knows that baby's got new clothes, but lately I see her
ribbons and her bows have fallen from her curls. She takes just like a woman. Yes, she does. She makes love just like a woman. Yes, she does, and she aches just like a woman. But she breaks just like a little girl. Queen Mary, she's my friend. Yes, I believe I'll go see her again. Nobody has to guess that baby can't be blessed till she finally sees that she's like all the rest, with her fog, her amphetamine, and her pearls. She takes just like a woman. Yes, she makes love just like a woman. Yes, she does, and she aches just like a woman. But she breaks just like a little girl.
I watched you suffer. Don't lick in pain. Now you decided to show me the same. No sweeping exits or off stage line. Make me feel bitter or treat you unkind. Baby, why you tossing? Couldn't drag me away. Why you tossing? Couldn't drag me away.
Choo choo. Choo choo.
Watching girls pass by, it ain't the latest thing. I'm
I love the colorful clothes she wears and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. I hear the sound of a gentle word on the wind that lifts her perfume through the air.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations.
Close my eyes, she's somehow closer now. Softly smile, I know she must be kind. In her eyes, she goes with me to a blossom room.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations. Excitations. Good vibrations. I don't know where, but she sends me there. Love, sensation. My elation. Gotta keep those loving good vibrations happening with her. Gotta keep those loving good vibrations happening with her. Gotta keep those loving good vibrations. The birds they sang at the break of day start again. I heard them say, don't dwell on what has passed away or what is yet to be. Oh, the wars, they will be fought again. The holy dove, she will be caught again, bought and sold and bought again. The dove is never free. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering.
There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. We asked for signs, the signs were sent. The birth betrayed, the marriage spent. The widowhood of every government, signs for all to see. You can add up the parts, but you won't have the sum. You can strike up the march, there is no drum. Oh, every heart to love will come, but like a refugee. Ring the bells and still can't ring. Forget your perfect offering. Oh, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Oh, that's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in.
We are gathered here to recall the blessings of the life of James Edward Cohen. In this gathering, we are governed by two spiritual principles. The first is Kavod Hamet, giving honor to the one who has died, remembering and celebrating Jim's amazing life. The second principle is Nichum Avelim, giving comfort to those who are mourning. Indeed, the Hebrew word for funeral is levaya, which literally means accompaniment, which is why we are here together, to gently and compassionately accompany Jim's wife, Connie, their children, Henry, Lexi, and Hannah, his grandchildren, Evie and Liam, his brother Howard and sister Nancy, as they and we all grieve, mourn, and remember. The Bible gives us the psalm. Mountain, earth, sky, and stars appear eternal and imperishable, but human beings turn to dust. They are swept away and they sleep. Like grass, they flourish for a day. In the morning, they sprout afresh. By nightfall, they fade and wither. Even if we live 70 years or through exceptional health 80, we are weighed down with hardship and suffering. Life quickly passes and our bodies break down. May we therefore learn to use our days wisely so that we may gain some insight. May our days of sorrow be matched with days of joy. May we come to recognize some lasting purpose in our lives and accomplish something that lasts beyond the span of our days. James Edward Cohen was born on July 30th, 1955 in Buffalo, New York, to Henry Cohen and Beverly Breger Cohen. His obituary describes him as self-aware. And it seems that when he was barely a teenager, he was self-aware enough to know he wasn't getting anything out of a conventional education. So he enrolled in a non-traditional boarding school in Vermont. Later, he enrolled at the University of Buffalo to study photography. And that's where he discovered his love for cooking while working in restaurants while paying for his photography equipment. It was at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, where he met his future wife, Connie. They moved to Colorado in 1979. Jim opened celebrated restaurants in Denver, Boulder, Vail, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and his hometown of Buffalo. He worked with and was recognized by some of the great chefs of the past 40 years. Jim was also a beloved mentor to a group of young men from successful Jewish families who were struggling in school due to learning disabilities such as ADD. Jim mentored them and helped many of them become chefs with restaurants of their own. In 2015, Jim suffered a massive stroke, leaving him locked in, fully conscious and alert, but unable to move any part of his body except his eyelids to blink. But Jim had a powerful belief: life is attitude. Soon he was able to express his thoughts using an alphabet chart held up by a physician. He vowed he would walk Lexi down the aisle at her wedding, and he did. Eventually, Jim returned to help Lexi run his restaurants. He rode a recumbent bike around Denver. He had just purchased a Peloton. He was often on the phone consulting to other chefs. Indeed, it is likely that that was exactly what he's doing when he died on Thursday, October 22nd, according to Connie. A phone was lying on the floor next to his wheelchair. A Psalm of David. The divine is my shepherd, I shall not want. Laying me down in green pastures, leading me beside the still waters, restoring my soul. Leading me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of love. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. Preparing a table before me in the presence of my enemies, anointing my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will accompany me all the days of my life, and I, dwelling in the house of the One forever. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, Binot asher yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yanchini v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet, lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha, shiftecha umishantecha, hema yenechamuni, Taruch lefanai shulchan, taruch lefanai shulchan, taruch lefanai shulchan, neged sorerai, dishanta v'shemen roshi, dishanta v'shemen roshi, Dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed, yirdefuni kol yamei chayai, V'shavti beveit Adonai, V'shavti beveit Adonai, le'orech yamim, yai-dai-dai-dai, yai-dai-dai-dai, yai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai. Yi-di-di-di. Yi-di-di-di. Yi-di-di-di-di. Each of us has a name. Each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our stature and our smile and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name given by the sea and given by our death. We will now hear from beloveds of Jim who will remember him. We begin with Jim's daughters, Lexi Scott and Hannah Cohen.
Hi, everyone. Okay, well, let me just. Okay, let's start this again. Hello, everyone. I want to start by thanking everyone for joining us virtually. It really kind of breaks my heart that we're not all here gathering together, as I, like my father, love a good gathering and celebration, and it seems a little unfair that we can't properly celebrate the guy today in person with good food and good drink after this. But hopefully we will be out of this pandemic soon enough and all able to enjoy each other's company again. Anyways, depending on how well you knew Jimbo and his taste for dark conversation, you might not be surprised to hear that I've been preparing this eulogy in my head since I was about 13 or so, as he liked to remind us regularly that he was going to die at 53, as that was the age that his father passed away, and we should just be prepared for such things. Thankfully, he beat his dad by a bit more than a decade, and I didn't have to write this 12 years ago. However, I did come close to having to deliver this 5 years ago after his stroke. But as we all know, Jimbo made an epic comeback, and he was here to walk me down the aisle and to meet my two babes, Evie and Liam. I will forever be grateful for the bonus 5 years we got from him. Anyway, I've always imagined I would just recite his life axioms, which have evolved and changed over the years. I'm sure most of you have heard a few of them. Like 1, life is attitude and nobody ever blocked for me. 2, driving in snow is all about tires, whatever that means. 3, cool is a disease. 4, get in front of the bus, not behind the bus. And don't fuck with the truck when you're only a Jeep. Just to name a few of the favorites. As I've been thinking about the axiom since his passing, I've realized that the axiom that means the most to me has somehow fallen off the list over the years. It now more than ever seems more important to remember. The origin story for this axiom took place around the time I was 6. Back in the Vale days, my dad and I would ride our bikes from our house in Westvale to Vale Village to get root beer floats on Sundays during the summer. On this particular ride, I had just gotten my first mountain bike, and on the way home, I decided to see how it would handle going very fast down a very steep hill. As usual, I found out the hard way that it did not handle very well. Halfway down the hill, I lost control, slammed on the brakes, and flipped over the handlebars, which resulted in me breaking my brand new 2 front teeth, as well as skinning up my face, knees, and elbows very badly. Now, this was 1989, so there was no way to call my mom from a cell phone to pick us up, and he must not have felt comfortable just leaving me there to get help. So instead, he made me get back on my bike and ride the 2 or so miles home. Bloodied and broken, I arrived home. I remember seeing the look of horror on my mom's face as we approached the house. I quickly proceeded to go inside to get a good look at the damage that had been done to my face and my teeth. And rather than being horrified and upset, I felt like a total badass tough girl who could now do anything. So true. After that, whenever I was faced with a great challenge, he would say to me, just get back on the bike. I've carried this saying within my head for 30 years now, and on most days find myself capable and resilient to the challenges life throws at me. As we all saw after his stroke, he himself got back on the bike and accomplished what no one thought possible. His buffalo grit and sheer will to overcome challenges will continue to inspire me for the rest of my life. I'm sure these next few months or even years are going to be more challenging than ever as I adjust to life without one of my best friends and mentor. Luckily, my brave little Evie Berry spent lots of time with Pop Pop the last 2.5 years, and I see his spirit shining through so strongly through her little sense of being a gritty, tough little girl who seems more than willing to always get back on the bike. Love to all.
That was great, Lexi.
Thanks, Mom.
I'm speaking next, I'm assuming, as
yes.
It's an order of people. Okay. Zoom can get confusing sometimes. Okay, well, I'm the blubber of the family, if you didn't notice already, so let me prepare myself with some tissues, but I'm going to be speaking directly to my dad, and this is a letter to my dad.
Who's right behind you?
And in here as well. So I am wearing my Empire hat as acknowledgement of my time working as a cook in your kitchen, and to all the people and memories, as food is no doubt part of your legacy. And I also have Smile with me as acknowledgement that music is also very much a part of your legacy. But as I've spent a lot of time thinking about you and your legacy, it really starts with my name. A name that I would spend a lifetime confronting and correcting people to let them know that it's Hannah, not Hannah. And that really is your legacy to me. Confrontation. You saw confrontation, conflict, and discomfort as a necessary and powerful force. You understood that instead of letting the emotions that arise and success. Without confrontation, you knew that without confrontation, whether it be with another person or with yourself, without confrontation, a person becomes stuck, and you would never be stuck. I saw it when you were confronted with the fact that you may never walk again, and in the moves you made with your career, the risk you took, and the challenges you faced to create your dream restaurants. You admired artists like Stanley Kubrick, Stravinsky, Bob Dylan, and Larry David because they were rule breakers and button pushers, never afraid of controversy or conflict. Remember when you took Henry and I to the Helmut Newton exhibit in New York City? That incredibly raunchy and risque. Well, my 12-year-old self did not see the value in this experience. I do now. And I know that your goal as a father was never to be a protector.
It's because my mother didn't know about that.
You were a provider, yes, but protecting us did us no favors in this world. You wanted to prepare us instead. And to prepare us, you had to prepare us to fight and to confront. You had to be my greatest teacher, my greatest challenger, the stone to sharpen my knife's edge. And let me tell you, it's incredibly challenging to confront a man who never thought he was wrong. But I understand it now. Your enjoyment of ruffling my feathers and bringing out the bitch in me was part of that preparation. Because bitch is just another synonym for a strong woman. And you understood the value of female strength and resilience. You not only came from a long line of strong women and spent your whole life surrounded by them, but you married a frickin' descendant of William Wallace. So when I think back on when you told me that you never felt protective of me in romantic relationships and that you more sympathized and felt sorry for the guy, I know that it was really you paying the highest compliment to me. And while sometimes I felt like you disagreed with me just to disagree with me, and you had endless opinions about the course of my life, you knew I would be okay no matter what, as long as I let go of fear. And you said families fight, but they still love each other, and you loved me. So, Dad, while you used to banter that you were the wrong father for me, it's clear that you were not. You were the perfect father for me. Your legacy is multifaceted, and I am fortunate for that. But I am eternally grateful that you prepared me to confront this world and myself, and I promise that I will continue forward with no fear. I love you, Dad.
Hannah. Yay.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Lexi. Now I want to invite Jim's sister, Nancy, to speak.
Okay. Since Jim's stroke 5 years ago, many of you have commented what a good sister I was to Jim. Although I think he would agree, he would want you to know what a good brother he was to me. Just to set the scene, Jim was the middle child born to a gregarious mother and a quiet but funny, gentle father. His older brother Howard was studious, organized, and kind of nerdy with stamp and coin and model airplane collections. I was the younger sister who was also studious and organized and somewhat conflict avoidant. Jim was the quintessential Kachleffel, a Yiddish word for one who stirs the pot. He loved commotion and activity and emotion. He later would comment that he thrived on chaos and, unlike me, hated pleasant. Jim was messy and noisy and confrontational and oppositional in a mostly lovable way. My mother, who adored him, once commented that she would forego groceries in order to afford 2 months of sleepaway camp for Jim, which he attended every summer starting at age 7. Of course, he loved camp as it was engaging and constant activity. As a young teenager, he decided to paint his bedroom walls black and red and spray paint obscenities all over the walls. He declared at the dinner table one night in 9th grade that he was quitting school. He endlessly argued with my mother about what he would and wouldn't wear, and if she was mad at him, he would insist that she didn't love him. It would have been very dull without him. In retrospect, he loved to provoke. He wanted to see what you could meet him with. None of this was particularly useful to me as a child, but I do think we all appreciated the life force that he brought to our family. It certainly was quiet when he went off to boarding school. The good brother part began in early adulthood. I remember talking to Jim long distance when I was a freshman in college, and I must have been having a down day, which I relayed to him. The following week, I received a letter from him telling me that life is like a gray slab of cement. Though I was somewhat confused at the time, his message was, feeling down, so be it. Look it in the eye and deal with it. Years later, when I was living with Jim and Connie while attending medical school, I came home from my surgery oral exam feeling discouraged and complaining, and he emphatically told me to just quit. It was his way of saying, find your power, don't wallow. Jim was a force of nature. His energy pushed out at you and demanded that you meet him. Jim had a tough outer core, but a very soft center. We used to joke that there was an Italian woman locked inside him. Although many initially found him intimidating, especially if you didn't grow up in a family where banter was a loving way to communicate, his intention was not to intimidate, but to bring out your life force. His heart was big and generous, and he loved to share it with you, often in the form of great food. His mind was alive and interesting, and he wanted you to engage with him. He was funny and confident and irreverent. We had many discussions about trying to see the world through others' lenses, but he liked to emphatically state that his was the right lens. Jim's acts of kindness and generosity to me and my family are too numerous to list. But I always knew he was there for me, and his love was unconditional. As kids, there was plenty of typical physical warfare in the form of paralyzed legs and cherry bellies and head noogies, but never any emotional warfare. No grudges, nothing I ever said or did offended him. Jim had a lust for life that pushed against collapse and despair, yours and his. The 5-year journey that he took us on through his stroke and subsequent recovery was life-changing for all involved. His ability to push against fear and to persevere was remarkable. He was proud of all that he accomplished, and he always had one more goal. He asked us all to push against our own fears for him, which was not easy, as he recklessly maneuvered in his electric wheelchair, resulting in countless falls of him and the 300-pound chair. He had no self-consciousness about being disabled, which allowed him to fight without all the baggage and shame that so many of us would likely carry. All those years of trying to convince my mother that he didn't care what people thought of the clothes and shoes that he wore to temple or to his own wedding paid off. We did get to see a somewhat softer Jim after his stroke, as one of the side effects was that he cried more easily. I first noticed this a few weeks after his stroke when he still couldn't move or talk, and I sat down to read him the Sunday New York Times. The front page story was about a visit that Pope Francis made to Philadelphia. I looked over at him and his eyes were welling up with tears. It was pretty endearing, although he used to fist pump against those tears once he could move his arms again. Jim's last act as a grandfather to Evie and Liam brought him the greatest joy. He loved his life and his 40 years of marriage too, and continuous conversation with Connie, and he adored his children. He told me almost daily how lucky he was. When COVID first started, I, being my usual Dr. Doom self, talked to him about his medical wishes should he end up in an ICU. He told me he wanted everything possible done. I was in disbelief given all he and we had been through. He told me not to get involved as I didn't know what it was like to be a grandparent. His recent death was sudden and unexpected, but quick and hopefully painless. He had just ridden his new Peloton bike, and he was fittingly in his kitchen when it happened. The EMTs attempted to resuscitate him as he would have wanted. I marveled seeing his body, wondering, where did all that energy go? I would like you to imagine with me that it has dispersed into the universe and has surrounded all of us with his love and acceptance and his insistence that we live with determination and fearlessness. Namaste.
Thank you, Nancy. Now invite Jordan Levy, Jim's lifelong childhood friend from Buffalo.
Hi, everybody. First, I'm honored to speak on everyone's behalf at this Zoom funeral today. I echo Lexi's comments. I wish we could all be here together. 62 years, that's how long we have been the closest of friends. Played together, competed a lot together, kissed the same girls, had our first sexual experience together with the same girl. All this since we've been 3 years old. So this honestly hits very, very hard. I thought today I would tell you all about the young Jimmy Cohen. And yes, those of us that have known him a long time always called him Jimmy. I know many of you know him only as Jim. From Sterling Avenue in Buffalo, growing up in a double with his grandfather and grandmother, who he adored, it was an extraordinary youth for him. His favorite football player of all time was Jim Brown. Jimmy always wanted to act like his idol. What you may not know was that Jimmy was a very big boy when he was young. And frankly, he was a bit of a bully. But if someone else was going to throw the first punch, he would be the first guy to run the other way. He wasn't really a fighter, he was always a lover. He was always the catcher in baseball, he was the center in basketball, the lineman on defense, and of course, the fullback on offense, emulating his idol, Jim Brown. As we got a little older, his new nickname became the Food King, because yes, he could out-eat anyone. He loved his food, and at a very young age, boy, could he eat. We had a paper route together. We're partners at 9 years old. And we set it up so that we could finish every day at the same house, Randy Benderson's home, so that we could shoot some baskets and then he could eat Dora's dinner every single night, 6 nights a week, before going home to have family dinner that Beverly cooked. 2 dinners every night. We had an extraordinary neighborhood crew, boys and girls. We hung out together every day and every night. I'm not sure when anybody ever did schoolwork. It was David, Randy, David, Bobby, Amy, Lisa, Patty, Nan, Wendy, Debbie, Lori, Pam. This was a giant crew. Then there was the Chatham gang, the Wolfsons, the Goldfarbs, the Francos, the Coles, the Levins. Wow, the list of friends goes on. And then Aaron Reichs, the Abelsons, the Unhursts, the Siegels, the Klebergs, the Callets, the Fildermans. The Cohen family had more friends than anybody anywhere. When we got into high school, Jimmy actually began to wander a bit, and his new nickname in our high school was Yip, because at campus school, in our class, he became the first hippie, the first guy to smoke pot, sort of, wear sandals, have really long hair, and have a really radical view. Eventually, he convinced his parents to enroll in this bogus school at the University of Buffalo that allowed him more freedom, so he really didn't have to do school. And when that didn't work out, he went away to boarding school, which Tom, I think, will talk about in a minute. Eventually found his way back to Buffalo, went to school. Honestly, truly, his first real cooking job was working for Mike Militello and his chef Vince Carriere at Mulligan's on Hurdle. I remember seeing Jimmy in the kitchen, washing pots, cutting vegetables, prepping, doing anything. He was absorbing it all in, and Vince was a great teacher for him. Jimmy eventually left Buffalo and frankly left most of all of his friends in Buffalo behind. Was CIA, Colorado, Connie, everything. For many years, frankly, none of us heard from him. We'd hear through Howard or Beverly what was going on, but really he sort of disappeared on us. Eventually, we all reconnected in Vail. And what we had as kids, boys and young men together was reignited instantly, because that was Jimmy. And we never really, it was like we never lost contact, because that was kind of how he was and who he was. He immediately adopted all of our spouses as friends for life. Honestly, Jimmy in many ways was more comfortable with the women in our lives than the men. And I often thought that he only kept us around so he could talk to Holly and Sherry and Lori and Eve, and of course, Lise. It was much more interesting to him to talk to them. As you know, everyone will talk about, he went on to create a phenomenal name for himself, and you know about James Byrd and Julia Childs. But what many of you don't know is that many of the most famous people in the food industry considered him a peer and a good friend. Drew Nearporant, Daniel Ballou, Alfred Portelli, Alex Strada, John George, Jonathan Waxman, so many more, would always ask me when I'd see them at the restaurants how Jimmy was doing. He really did reach the top of his profession. He earned it every single day because of his passion, his hard work, and particularly his love for learning about cooking every day. I'm gonna go off script for a second. One month to the day before Jimmy had this fateful stroke, we had a 60th birthday party for him. He pulled Howard and I aside, and he had had a stroke with us a handful of years earlier hiking in Aspen. He pulled us aside and he sat us down and he said, if I have a massive stroke, if I have anything that happens that's bad, I want you guys to look me in the eye and commit that you'll pull the plug. I know no one else is going to want to do it, but I'm asking the two of you to do that for me. When this happened, Howard, of course, was there. I flew out pretty quickly. And Jimmy had an opportunity to make his own decision. He was trapped. And all the things that he had said to us went out the window, because when it was all said and done, they sat in the room and he made the decision to live, not to die, by blinking his eyes. And he did that because of his absolute desire for life that he lived through every day. Those last 5 years since that fateful day, Jimmy was different. He wasn't that same sort of sarcastic, sometimes negative human being. He was the most optimistic person there was. He valued every day. He didn't know when he made that decision that he was going to have a daughter getting married. He didn't know he was going to have 2 grandchildren. He didn't know he would live 5 more years. He didn't know if he'd ever walk again. He did all those things because of his absolute passion for life and for enjoying it and for his family. There's an old Jewish proverb that I think is very poignant at a time like this, and it says something about birth is the beginning and death is a destination, and everything in between is the journey that defines who that man is and what his life was all about. When you look at James Edward Cohen and you look at what his life was all about, the first 60 years and the last 5, it says so much about this extraordinary man, the amount of friends, the amount of people, the things that people did for him. Can never forget Ken and all the things he did for Jim when he was sick. A lot of people were there. Ben, of course, more than almost anybody, every day holding his hand. And of course, the family. You see them all today. It's an amazing family. So Jimmy, we are all much better people for having had you in our lives. And I know you're up there right now cooking for Henry and Beverly, arguing about whose brisket's better, and getting ready to go for a 40-mile bike ride. Peace, my brother. Thank you for letting me do this.
Thank you, Jordan. Now call on Tom Chapin, Jim's friend of 50 years, since attending boarding school together in Vermont.
Hi. So Franz Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends. Having your best friend die definitely gets you thinking about the larger meanings. Jim really knew how to be a good friend, and I will feel forever indebted to him. My life has been made so much better with this friendship. I met Jim when we were supposed to have a fight at some party when we were 12 or so, but it never materialized. We became close friends on a trip in Europe when we were 15 and 16, philosophizing for many days in a French sidewalk cafe over coffee and croissant, beer and sandwiches. We decided in the optimism of youth that we were hedonists, and that if people were really connoisseurs of their feelings, there'd be much less pain in the world, much less bad behavior, because it doesn't feel good to mess with people. I still think this is true, so long as people aren't deceived by some stupidity or other. We went on a bunch of trips together. The most memorable to me was when we were both under 20 at Tulum in the Caribbean coast of Mexico. Tulum today is yoga camps and fancy restaurants. Back then, it was a wilder world, a Mayan ruin and a lighthouse where we got fresh water run by 5 or 6 Mexican Navy guys who we played volleyball with. There were 5 of us in our little camp, and we spearfished and gathered coconuts and provided for most all of our needs. It was the most easy and natural life any of us had ever experienced. This was when the reef was alive and the jungle was unbroken by roads. When we left that Garden of Eden, we went to the colonial city of Merida, and we went kind of crazy, eating in restaurants, drinking in bars without thinking about money. And it wasn't long before we realized we were both very nearly broke. Jim somehow finagled a ticket to his aunt's in Florida. I hitchhiked up to my sister's place in Rochester, which is a long run in flip-flops in the snow. Jim came to my sister's and we played the Japanese game Go for a few days. Go was a short-lived obsession of his at that time. Jim was interested in the idea that in Go, you play for degrees of freedom rather than defeating the other person as you do in chess. I am not sure we were playing the game right, but it was the idea of degrees of freedom that kept us playing. One of the last things we talked about was wine, and he recounted a sommelier friend of his who said, "You only have so many bottles of wine you're going to drink. Don't waste them on bad wine." He was hassling me for cheaping out on my wine purchases, for going for quantity over quality. He said, "You're like me, a hedonist. This is your job." And he got me to sign up for a discount online wine shop, and I have not tasted bad wine since his death. He was living full blast up to the end. Connie told me he was on the Bacon of the Month Club and the Ice Cream of the Month Club. Every time I think of him, which will be often, I'll remind myself to look for the deeper pleasures and meanings so plentiful in people and things all around. But the most striking thing about all these memories that I've been rehashing the past 2 weeks is how recent they seem. Even though 50 years have passed since we sat in that cafe, people talk about living memory, and Jim will be right here with me as long as I know anything. But his death makes me think, like the bottled wine, you only have so many, so don't waste them. There we go.
Thank you, Tom. Now invite Chris Larita to speak. Chris is a longtime friend from the restaurant business in Colorado.
Hello, everybody. This might be somewhat hard for me, so forgive me. James Edward Cohen came into my life in 1984. He used to shop at my parents' specialty food store in Lakewood, Colorado. He was the chef at Tante Louise. And he actually was part of the reason my parents started our wholesale food business. He would come in buying the incredible cheeses and salami and prosciutto that we had at the time and say, "Why can't I get this stuff from my restaurant?" My dad said, "How much do you want? We'll bring it in for you." That was 1983. Summer of 1984, Jim started calling, asking if my brother and myself would want to go to the lodge at Vail and help him out through the season because he had just taken over at the lodge and needed some talented help, I guess. Me being 18 years old, growing up in the restaurant business, I don't know how talented I was, but Jim gave me a shot. What was supposed to be 3 months in Vail turned into a 7-year learning relationship with Jim at the lodge at Vail. A lot of people thought Jim was ornery, feisty, but deep down inside, I think Nancy hit it right on the head. Jim was very gruff and tough on the outside, but a giant marshmallow on the inside. Very lovable guy. Jim was strong. Jim was honest. Honest as the day is long. Funny, loving. He wasn't a street fighter, but we all know that Jim was a great fighter the last 5 years. Jim was a son. Jim was a brother. Jim was a father, grandfather. I consider Jim my second father. For the 7 years that I worked for him, he was there by my side. I got away with a lot of things in Vail. Everybody thought I was very disrespectful in not calling him chef in the kitchen. I called him Jim. Somebody confronted me one day about my disrespect for him, and I thought about it. And when Chef walked through the kitchen, I said, "Hey, Chef." He kept walking, ignored me. I called Jim. He stopped and looked at me. "What do you need, smart aleck?" Jim was my mentor, as he was to many others in the kitchen. He was a teacher and one of my best friends, and I'll cherish every memory from day one, 36 years ago, to October 19th was the last time I saw Jim. He wanted to come shopping down at our warehouse and get some food. Brought Nancy and Terry. And I had no idea it would be the last time I would see my best friend. Jim taught me a lot about myself, how to deal with people, problems, and move forward, and not to dwell on the past. I used to get in a funk when I was in the kitchen, and he would tell me to move beyond it, grow up. I was only 18 at the time, and about 4 years into it, 5 years into it, I became the sous chef of the Wildflower in 1980, 90, what was that? I don't even know, 90. And one night I had a very bad night, and Jim loved chewing on me because I could take it. And I'd sit around and mope for 3 or 4 days. And then he came up to me one day and he said, "Think of that ash chewing as like pruning a tree. Without being pruned once in a while, you will never grow big, strong, and beautiful and flourish." He helped create me and what I've become in my life. Jim was my sounding board. He always listened intently, and Jim would think, and then he would share his honest opinion with you. Jim loved his family and his friends. Jim loved food. Jim loved teaching and educating people about food. What an educator he was. Jim will be missed by many, but will live in our hearts and our memories forever. Godspeed, God bless, and rest in peace, my dear friend. I will miss you.
Thank you, Chris. Now call upon Blake and Terry Learned, dear friends in Denver.
So, sitting down to write our thoughts about Jim, it seemed like nearly an impossible task to capture all of the memories, the joy, and the love that Jim brought to our lives. When I met Blake 30 plus years ago, he had this established group of friends. At times, I felt like I was not only dating Blake, but his friends. The group of Nancy, Jay, Jim, Connie, and Ben had already evolved into a unit, and I quickly embraced the whole package. Over the years, Blake continued his close friendship with Jim. I became quick friends, as well as our 2 daughters who entered our family. Jim had amazing ability to connect, accept, and love each one of us.
During our 40-year friendship, Jim and I shared hundreds of meals, watched and argued over countless movies, and debated politics. I had to listen to his stupid libertarian ideas and spend afternoons on our bicycles. When I think about trying to describe what I knew of Jim, the most outstanding thing was his life force. In Hebrew, it is nefesh, or nishma, the breath of life. Jim would laugh at any attempt of me trying to be spiritual, and Hebrew references would be particularly humorous to him. His life force led him to perfect his craft, bringing passion to everything he did, whether it was being the sag wagon driver for our bicycle trips. We spent the day riding, he spent the day smoking camels, dropping acid, and having chicken cacciatore waiting at the campsite at the end of the day. How many pizza crust recipes did we all try when he was preparing to open the pizzeria? How many meals did Jim prepare or comp for us at his restaurants? Jim was passionate about everything, the nuggets, his music, family, friends. Things came crashing down 5 years ago with his stroke. We spent that night, that first night, asking ourselves if Jim would want to go on. Ultimately, that question was answered rather quickly by Jim. His devastating stroke would have stopped many of us, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. His nefesh, ever present, carried him through the worst of the initial treatments and indignities. He was fond of saying I must have been a genius because I lost 1 billion brain cells a minute during the time my brain was not getting oxygen. I'm not sure, maybe he said trillion. We watched and cheered as he overcame one obstacle after another. And I had the privilege to watch as he walked Lexi down the aisle for her wedding.
What really brought Jim and I together was a shared love of food and bringing people together. Even for this service, the first thing I thought of was, what were we going to eat, rather than what are we going to say? But the first Thanksgiving after Jim's stroke, we gathered the mishpocha for dinner. And this was the first time Jim was leaving Craig Rehab Hospital. The motto for the event was life is attitude in honor of Jim. And there was no greater joy than that moment when he came up and we were all here in our t-shirts. Years and years on, Jim and I would prepare these menus for the holiday gatherings, and we'd go back and forth, and it was just so fun. You know, it was fun going to Costco with Jim on a regular basis, where the staff there were convinced that Jim and I were married, or when we'd banter at the farmer's market about who knew which mushrooms are the best or the apples. Of course, he was right. But Jim made even the most routine things, just such a delight. These past 7 months during the pandemic, Jim was truly the happiest of us all. Jim filled his time with music, gardening, cooking, and spending the time with the people he loved the most, those grandchildren. But when many of us complained of boredom, Jim never did, and instead stuck to his famous line, of which my daughters have heard time and time again: the only boring people get bored. I'm so sorry. I mess those things up all the time. Jim joined many clubs during the pandemic. He was concerned about the small farmers, and so he joined the Alaskan Fish Club. He joined the Pork Club. But his most famous club that we were laughing about was he had joined the American Bacon Club. We had the privilege of having 2 amazing dinners thanks to Jim, on evenings outside, thanks to Jim and the Alaskan Fish Club. During these past months, when I was feeling down or overwhelmed, I would call Jim to seek advice. I'd launch into the whole explanation as why I was sad or what had happened, and Jim would always respond with, "What is wrong with you?" And every time he made me laugh, and I would realize he was right, which pained me to admit, because we all know how much he loved to hear he was right. Jim knew how to bring things to perspective. Jim knew what mattered, and Jim knew that our problems are never as insurmountable as they might seem. As we enter into the holiday season, and the days are shortening, and the pandemic is growing, and Jim is not here, we're unable to gather as a family during this time, and probably for the holidays. the problems do really feel insurmountable. It certainly feels dark, but every time I find myself too focused on that, I hear Jim's voice in my head say, "What is wrong with you?" And every time I smile and I laugh, and I think of my memories of Jim. I'll always be grateful to experience Jim's unconditional love and for watching how Jim didn't just live, but rather he experienced life to the fullest. I hope to carry his amazing humor, determination, his strength, and love to all of our family gatherings going forward. He was everything a big brother should be, and I am forever going to miss him.
Oh, Jim, I'm going to miss you terribly. You taught me so much. And one of the most important things you taught me was to say, I love you. And Jim, I love you.
Thank you, Terry and Blake. Now call on Ben Honigman, another dear friend in Denver.
1982, I attended an art show in Denver. After the show, a number of us went to get sushi in a small restaurant in Aurora, Colorado. I sat at the counter between Jim, who I'd just met, and another person who was a local artist. Jim and this person began a conversation about whether cooking was an art or a craft. Guess which side Jim was on? Well, the discussion soon escalated into a full-blown screaming match. Remember, I was sitting in between, so I was feeling a bit unnerved, but gravitated to the passion of this person who I didn't know, but who was clearly a man of convictions. Judging by the look in his eyes, if he could have jumped that counter and grabbed the sushi knife from the person preparing our food, he would have, I have no doubt, used it in this moment of passion. Shortly after that, we met again at a birthday party and spent hours talking to each other about growing up and life and sports, and discovered we had a lot in common. Him coming from Buffalo and me from Youngstown, Ohio. The rest, as they say, is history, and we've been great friends since then. Our kids grew up together and we spent endless hours discussing how to raise them. We had very diametrically opposite philosophies, but it was one of the many things we loved to argue about, and it brought us closer together. Jim was a major influence in my life, and I'd like to tell you about some of those things. First of all, as you've heard, cooking. Cooking was an all-important aspect of Jim's life. And I took advantage of that by asking him for great recipes that were always easy to make. And he was always accommodating. I have a collection of those wonderful dishes, and that will always remind me of him. After his stroke, we talked nearly every day, and one topic of conversation was always, "What are you cooking tonight?" And there were many days where I would call him in the middle of preparing something and ask him for advice on seasoning or length of time to cook something or preparation of a dish. Oh, how I will miss that gravelly voice telling me what to do in order to make my dish better. Next is music. As you've heard, Jim is one of those people who was a connoisseur of all kinds of music. Jim always told me of new artists, but we always came back to a discussion about what's the best album or the best song from artists like Dylan or the Stones or Miles Davis. He also copied discs for me of artists that he loved so that I could broaden my tastes. And then there was biking. We started off mountain biking, but he switched to road biking and tried to convince me to get one. I, of course, resisted, as was our pattern of behavior, and then finally gave in. It was, of course, one of the best things that I did, and I ride to this day. In fact, our mutual friend Blake, who you just heard from, and Jim and I would ride together after his stroke, and even had thoughts about riding cross country to Buffalo. That was quite a pipe dream. We did, however, have wonderful rides around Boulder for many years prior to the stroke. In fact, we were going to replicate those rides on the Peloton once we got used to the equipment and we got into shape. Unfortunately, we never did. Another area Jim and I shared was watching movies. He hated frivolous stories or action movies, especially after his stroke, because he couldn't hear so well, but he loved dark and depressing films. That's why we loved the Telluride Film Festival so much, and we spent many years going to this festival. Our taste in movie themes or stories weren't always the same, but it provided us an opportunity to argue and banter about acting and life and relationships. There was one movie in particular he'd always kid me about. It was an Iranian film called The Apple. In my opinion, it was a movie so bad that I walked out after 20 minutes. It was unbearable to watch, yet he stayed and said it was one of the greatest films he'd ever seen, and that I should expand my horizons and not be so wedded to the same attitudes or ideas. This was a theme that permeated our relationship for nearly 4 decades. Whether it was movies or music or food, he always encouraged me to try new things. Although I've always been a huge sports fan and didn't necessarily need Jim to teach me about sports, we did have running arguments about so many issues in baseball and football and other sports. But perhaps the best times I've had in watching sports has been in the last 4 to 5 years of following the Nuggets and NBA basketball. Jim loved the Nuggets and he loved basketball, and despite his stroke, he was able to remember players and events from years ago that I always had to check on to look up their veracity. He also had an uncanny ability to watch players on the bench and determine whether they were in a bad mood or were angry at the coach. And sure enough, the next day in the paper or on the internet, there'd be a story about what Jim had just seen and observed and how it impacted the play of that individual. He always believed he could be a better NBA coach than whoever was on the bench for the Nuggets. I have no doubt he could have contributed. Jim and I shared season tickets with the group, and we would go to 8 to 10 games together every year for the past 5 to 6 years. And after the stroke, this became a real adventure. From finding a restaurant to go to before the game, to finding a place for his wheelchair, to walking the distance from the ticket booth to our seats, which he did with his walking sticks. The remarkable thing was how many people stopped to help, and more inspiring was how many of the ushers and ticket folks got to know him and always made accommodations to help him in his trek to our seats. Fortunately for me and for Jim, not once in the last 5 years did he ever have to go to the bathroom during the game, because that would have been an impossible journey. Our most memorable game was a few years ago when we were able to secure courtside seats for a Nuggets-Boston Celtics game. He talked about that for months. Perhaps the most important thing, however, that Jim gave me was a love of life, as you've heard from others. Prior to the stroke, he always talked about never wanting to be on a ventilator, as Jordy indicated, or to be kept alive in a vegetative state. But after the stroke, he gained a new appreciation for life, and he wanted to enjoy every moment. Nancy and I discussed with him those desires a few days after the stroke to determine whether he was prepared for what lay ahead. And he blinked his eyes, as you've heard from others, in a very emphatic way to let us know he wanted to live. Nancy and I both thought it was unlikely that he would survive the episode. He, of course, proved us wrong. This episode of discussing death and dying and resuscitations with Jim changed my attitude about the certainty of predicting a patient's ability to survive in my clinical practice as an emergency physician. Over the past 5 years, as his strength and mental state improved, he became more engaged physically and mentally. After the birth of those beautiful grandkids, he exuded happiness and savored every day with them. This attitude carried over to all aspects of his life, and I was always amazed at his joy for life, despite some of the cruelties of the times that we live in. I want to close by just going over a couple of my favorite axioms about life, some of which you've already heard. You've heard that driving in snow is all about the tires. That's especially true for us here in Colorado. One of my favorites was fat equals flavor, which led many of us to start statins, of course. But my favorite was when you buy quality, when you buy quality, you'll only cry once. I feel in knowing Jim Cohen, I have truly bought quality, and my only crying was when he left us. I miss you dearly, my dear friend.
Thank you, Ben. Our final speaker is Jim's nephew, Michael Cohen.
Here.
All right, mic check. Can I get a thumbs up? Awesome. Let me pull this up. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I'm truly honored. After kind of hearing everyone speak, I feel completely unqualified to be doing this. But when I heard Jordy speak, I realized that he got me my first job in sales, and it's a public speaking skill set that I gained, but it doesn't really prepare you for this. But I am very honored. So I am Michael Cohen. I am Jim's step-nephew, if you will, but Jim's nephew. And my first memory meeting the Cohen clan was at Bev's, which birthday? 75th birthday in Vegas. And it was a large family gathering, and I was about 15 years old. I'm turning 32 shortly. People typically remember a lot from that time period in their life. 15 years old, that's when you start to have a cognitive brain. For me, it was a little bit of a fuzzy time period just due to so much turmoil and change. And I was about to be moving from New Jersey, where I grew up, to Colorado for the first time to move in with my new family, with Howard, Allie, and Kate. And thinking back to that day and to that birthday, I saw some of the pictures before the ceremony started. I have two fond memories and two main memories that stick out. The first one is actually meeting Nancy. And there's a real specific reason for this. I'm a person who in this life has never had a foot massage. I don't like them. I personally think they're weird, and I'm debilitatingly ticklish. But somehow within the first hour of meeting Nancy, I found myself in Howard's hot tub getting a foot rub from her, and it was really not weird. So safe to say, that's a pretty quick way to compound some trust with someone. So I thought of Nancy as this cool, holistic aunt from the get-go. And just to add onto that, I have fond memories of doing Tai Chi with her and Jay in their living room when we woke up. The other memory I have from that day was a silly and random conversation that I had with Jim. And now I realize this is going to lead to one of the axioms, which I had no idea that I would also be including in what I would say about Jim. I just started thinking about getting my driver's license at that time. I was 15 years old, but I was going to be moving to Colorado. I needed to get a car. And as Colorado is very snowy, we had a conversation about what were the best cars to drive in the snow. I remember that Jim was making a case that a Toyota Previa minivan equipped with all-wheel drive and a twin-cam supercharged engine was the ultimate snow vehicle. And I also remember that I thought Jim was batshit crazy for saying this. But he did really make a convincing case, and I think I remember Lexi voicing her agreement as well. And Lex, you have to actually tell me if it was the Toyota Previa, it was the specific model, but I know what it looks like. I actually looked up a review of the Toyota Previa this morning, and the main quote from the author that stuck with me was, "Even Toyota admits that a piece of you dies when you buy a Previa." Their 1996 brochure says, "We know when you decided you really ought to have a van, you probably winced a little bit. Visions of luxury car quality faded while you prepared to do the right thing." But at the end of the conversation, Jim got kind of serious and clarified his position with some sage advice. And he said, "Michael, it's all about the tires." I don't know how to properly convey this to everyone who's on the call today, but that was the kind of male advice that I needed and yearned for at a time in my life. And it's actually something that I've repeated to people hundreds of times since. I think there's a proper metaphor in there about solid foundation and staying grounded, but I'm going to leave that one up to interpretation.
So right then and there, Jim planted the seed that would grow into my lifelong obsession with obscure cult classic cars. I'll spare you the list, but for example, my favorite snow car is not a Previa. It's a 1993 Camry DX wagon because it's an unholy and massively lopsided station wagon that drifts like crazy in the snow when you pull the e-brake. This small conversation between Jim and I naturally gave way to our mutual love for bicycles. I remember Jim teaching me about classic American steel bicycle manufacturers, and quickly my taste in bicycles mimicked my taste in cars, obscure, nuanced, and only for the enthusiasts. Jim was incredibly inspirational in my decision after college, to ride my bicycle from Colorado to New York City. It's still to this day one of the most important things I've ever done. At one point in that trip, I had over 20 flat tires in a 5-day period through Kansas, and you better believe I was questioning the quality of my tires. After Jim had his stroke, he had expressed to me several times that he wanted to work his way back to be able to ride his bicycle across the country as well. And I told him no matter where I was, I would join him. It was definitely it's going to be a lifelong regret of mine that we were never able to accomplish that. It would have been one hell of a memory. About 5 years ago, right around the time when Jim had his stroke, I built my first custom bicycle. It was a vintage-inspired steel frame enthusiast build that Jim definitely approves of. He told me as much. But what I never told him is that one of the last touches I put on that bicycle was a small decorative pin that I fixed to the saddlebag that attaches to my seat. The pin was a 1990s Chrysler Town & Country minivan with wood panels on the side. And I put it there for Jim. I think of him every time I take a moment to appreciate that bicycle, and every time I take a substantial ride. I'm incredibly grateful that I was able to have Jim in my life and call him an uncle. And I know my words probably don't do him justice, but there's a little spark that he lit inside of me that will never go out. Although we spent less time together than I would have liked, he helped shape me in ways that he couldn't even imagine. Rest in peace, Jim.
Cheers.
Thank you, Michael. We now will resume the more liturgical and song-filled part of the service. Let's see here. There we go.
Please sing this with us. Stay muted, but sing along. Secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You say I took the name in vain. I don't even know the name, but if I did, well, really, what's it to you? There's a blaze of light in every word. It doesn't matter which you heard, the holy or the broken. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I told the truth, I didn't come to fool you. And even it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord of Song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
El Malay Rachamim. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May the memory of Jim Cohen be for us a blessing. May we never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May Jim Cohen's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share be not severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. El male rachamim, shochen bamromim. Hamse menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashechina. B'ma'alot kedoshim utehorim, kezohar harakia mazhirim, et nishmat Yaakov ben Chanini, shehalach le'olamo, b'gan Eden tehei menuchato. Ana bal harachamim, hasirechu beseter kenafecha le'olamim, utzror b'tzror chaim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nohomar Amen. As is your practice, I invite the mourners and anyone who wishes to please rise as we offer this sacred prayer, offering us a vision of a world beyond sorrow and even beyond joy, holding it all as one. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, bi'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'galav v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mivorach Leolam Ulamei Amaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal Shmei Dekudsha B'richu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'yimru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen. Please be seated.
When I die, let them judge me by my company of friends. Let them know me as the footprints that I left upon the sand. Let them laugh for all the laughter, let them cry for laughter's end. But when I die, let them judge me by my company of friends. When I die, let them toast to all the things that I believe. Let them raise a glass to consciousness and not spill a drop of grief. Let the bubbles rise at midnight, let their tongues get light as thieves. And when I die, let them toast to all the things that I believe. I believe in restless hunger. I believe in red balloons. I believe in pride and thunder. In the end, I do believe. And I believe in inspiration. I believe in lightning bugs. I believe in snow creation. In the end, I do believe. I believe in intuition. I believe in being wrong. I believe in contradiction. In the end, I do believe. And I believe in living smitten. I believe all hearts will mend. I believe all book is written by a company of friends. When I die, let them judge me by my company of friends. Let them know me as the footprints that I left upon the sand. Let them laugh for all the laughter. Let them cry for laughter's end. When I die, let them judge me by my company of friends.
A final blessing and a final song. Hamakom Yametchem Sha'ar Avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May all of us be held in the one who is the place of this world amongst all, a community of all of us who know grief and loss. May we who mourn find comfort. May we who fall beneath sorrow's burden find the strength to rise and walk on. Let us grant each other peace and give each other courage. Let us spread out a blanket of love and compassion that we might aid in each other's healing.
Oh, gather up the brokenness and bring it to me now. The fragrance of those promises you never dared to vow. The splinters that you carried, the cross you left behind. Come healing of the body, come healing of the mind. And let the heavens hear you, the penitential hymn. Come healing of the spirit, come healing of the wind. Behold the gates of mercy in arbitrary space, and none of us deserving beauty or the grace. Oh, solitude of longing, where love has been confined. Come healing of the body, come healing of the mind. Oh, see the darkness moving that tore the light apart. Come healing of the reason, come healing of the heart. Oh, troubled dust concealing an undivided love. The heart beneath is beating to the broken heart above. Oh, let the heavens falter, let the earth proclaim, come healing of the altar, come healing of the name. Oh, longing of the branches to lift the little bud. Oh, longing of the armies to purify the blood, and let the heavens hear it, the penitential hymn, come healing of the spirit, come healing of the limb, and longing of the hearing, the penitential hymn, come healing of the spirit, come healing of the limb.
Well, dear family, and for our service for Jim and for all of you.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Hal. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
We are very, very grateful to have had a huge turnout and a beautiful memorial service for a terrific guy. He will be greatly missed.
Love you guys.
Can they hear us?
Yeah, I took myself off.
Love
mute.
you guys.
The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. I am following the river down the highway through the cradle of the Civil War. I'm going to Graceland, Graceland, to Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to Graceland. Poor boys and pilgrims with families, and we are going to Graceland. And my traveling companion is 9 years old. He's the child of my first marriage. But I've reason to believe we both will be received in Graceland. She comes back to tell me she's gone. As if I didn't know that, as if I didn't know my own bed. As if I'd never noticed the way she brushed her hair from her forehead. And she said, losing love is like a window in your heart. Everybody sees you're blown apart. Everybody sees the wind blow.
coisa mais linda, mais cheia de graça. Ela, menina que vem e que passa, num doce balanço, caminho do mar. Moça do corpo dourado do sol de Ipanema, o seu balançado é mais que um poema. É a coisa mais linda que eu já vi passar. Ah, porque estou tão sozinho. Ah, porque tudo é tão triste. Ah, beleza que existe. A beleza que não é só minha, que também passa sozinha. Ah, se ela soubesse que quando ela passa, o mundo sorrindo se enche de graça e fica mais lindo por causa do amor.
Tall and tan and young and lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking, and when she passes, each one she passes goes ah. When she walks, she's like a samba that swings so cool and sways so gently, that when she passes, each one she passes goes ah.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't
Go, Jimmy,
back
go.
down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. Gonna stand my ground, won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I got just one life in a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. No, I won't back down.
I wanna live, I wanna give. I've been a miner for a heart of gold. It's these expressions I never give that keep me searching for a heart of gold. And I'm getting old. Keep me searching for a heart of gold. And I'm getting old.
What are you doing, Ellie? Sing her a song.
Little baby, don't you cry. Grandpa's gonna buy you a mug. And that mockingbird song.
Oh, you're making her cry.
I've been to Hollywood, I've been to Red
Here, here. It's been a pleasure to be your friend. Talk about constant.
Keep me searching for a heart of gold. You keep me searching and I'm growing old. Keep me searching for a heart of gold. I've been a miner for a heart of gold.
I see the sword of Damocles is right above your head. They're trying a new treatment to get you out of bed. But radiation kills both bad and good, it cannot differentiate. So to cure you, they must kill you. The sword of Damocles hangs above your head. I've seen lots of people die from car crashes or drugs. Last night on 33rd Street I saw a kid get hit by a bus. But this drawn out torture over which part of you lives is very hard to take. To cure you they must kill you, the sword of Damocles above your head.
Nobody feels any pain tonight as I stand inside the rain. Everybody knows that baby's got new clothes, but lately I see her ribbons and her bows have fallen from her curls. She takes just like a woman. Yes, she does. She makes love just like a woman. Yes, she does. And she aches just like a woman. But she breaks just like a little girl. Queen Mary, she's my friend. Yes, I believe I'll go see her again. Nobody has to guess that baby can't be blessed till she finally sees that she's like all the rest, with her fog, her amphetamine, and her pearls. She takes just like a woman. Yes, she makes love just like a woman. Yes, she does, and she aches just like a woman. But she breaks just like a little girl.
I watched you suffer. Don't lick in pain. Now you decided
Watching girls pass by, it ain't the latest thing. I'm just standing in a doorway. I'm just trying to make some sense out of these girls that passing by. The tales they tell of men. I'm not waiting on a lady. I'm just waiting on a friend. Smile relieves a heart that grieves. Remember what I said. I'm not waiting on a lady. I'm just waiting on a friend. I'm just waiting on a friend. Just waiting on a friend.
Listening to my bluebird land, she can tell you why. Deep within her heart, you see, she knows only crying. Oh, just lying. There she sits on a lofty perch, strangest color blue. Flying is forgotten now. She thinks only of you. Ooh, just you. So get all those blues, must be 1,000 hues, and each is differently used. You just know. You sit there mesmerized by the depth of her eyes. If
I love the colorful clothes she wears and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. I hear the sound of a gentle word on the wind that lifts her perfume through the air.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations.
Close my eyes, she's somehow closer now. Softly smile, I know she must be kind. In her eyes, she goes with me to a blossom room.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations. Excitations. Good vibrations.
I don't know where, but she sends me there. Gotta keep those loving good vibrations happening with her.